Hello and welcome to this video in the Reason Tips series. Today's topic is drum production for electronic music, specifically dubstep. We'll start out with an empty rack and create a full dubstep drum kit from scratch. As you can see, I've already set my song tempo to 140 beats per minute, the standard tempo for this genre. Note that one of the most characteristic features of dubstep is the half-time pattern. This means that instead of placing snare drums on the second and fourth beat in a bar, we'll place one snare drum on the third beat. Okay, theoretical stuff out of the way, let's get started. Reason allows you to construct your drums in many different ways, and there are multiple approaches to the topic. Some people like to place audio clips of their drum samples directly into an audio track in the sequencer, but I prefer to use Reason's powerful Kong drum sampler. Since I don't know what style of drums I'll be going for yet, and therefore also can't judge how much layering and processing is going to be involved, I'm not going to use a single Kong for my drums, but create a single Kong unit for every major part of my drums. I could just create one unit and use multiple outs, but the technique I'll use today has several advantages, to which I'll get in a minute. It should also be noted that more than anything else, this is a question of personal preference, so design your workflow towards your needs. Let's go look for a suitable kick drum in Reason's factory sound bank. We'll create a Kong and insert an nano sampler on the first pad. Now let's open up the browser and head to the factory sound bank, the Kong section more specifically. This kick has a nice round boomy low end, so I'll import this one. Now let's go look for another one to layer on top of the first one. I could do this by using the layer function in the nano, but I'll use another pad for the second kick drum because I might want to slightly nudge one of the samples later on, and this method will allow me to do that. This one is quite nice and punchy, and I think it will make a nice layer. Okay, let's bring in a basic pattern from this empty sequencer lane where I've got some notes prepared. And of course we want both kick drums to be triggered, so we'll head into the sequencer and copy the MIDI notes from drum 1 to drum 2. Now we've run into a problem. The bass frequencies of the two kick drums aren't really compatible. We don't need the bass of both of them though. After all, we just want to layer the second kick for a bit of extra punch. So let's take out the low end of our layered kick using one of Kong's built-in filters. There, that already sounds much better. But the main kick is still too boomy, so we'll use the decay dial to take away some of the bass tail of this kick. Okay, it's starting to sound nice and tight now, but let's see whether we can get the kicks to sit with each other a bit better. So we'll head into the note clip of our kick drum, and then let's see whether nudging the second sample around a bit will help. Okay, there, that definitely helped. Another advantage of layering in the sequencer is that you can have individual drums perform ghost notes or little rolls like this. Let's round the kick off by inserting a transient shaper into Kong's Master FX slot. Transient shaping is a great way to add some punch to your drums, so let's bring up the attacks a little bit. Now in order to give it the desired amount of heaviness, we could use an EQ to boost the low end, but a technique I really like is using the Audiomatic Retro Transformer. The bottom setting is great for bringing out the low end, but it's very powerful, so we'll have to use the dry-wet dial to find the sweet spot between too little and too much bass. Okay, I think that's about right. Okay, on to the snare. We'll create another Kong and start looking for one. This time it should be something with a nice ring to it. This sounds nice. The first thing I'll do is pitch it up a bit. And now let's put another snare on top and combine the two. This one sounds a bit clappy, which reminds me, why not also load a clap and layer it on top? We can find a wide variety of claps in the claps folder in Kong's library. Alright, there, now we've got something to work with. Let's start by tuning the samples a little bit. And then let's also use the decay dial to make them a bit shorter. At this point, I'll bring in the notes. And now it's time to shape the snare to fit our genre. So we'll create an EQ and start off by finding the tone of our snare and boosting it a bit. We should find that somewhere between 170 and 230 Hz. And while we're at it, we can also use the EQ to clean up some mid-end muddiness and to crispen up the top a little bit. Okay, our snare is still very weak, but this is where the Scream 4 sound destruction unit comes in as a real game changer. Tape mode is my favorite, so let's see what that will do to our snare drum. So as we can hear, some good tape saturation can make a massive difference to our drum sound. So far our drums are sounding nice and big, but they're still very dry. Just applying reverb to a drum track like this would take out much of the punch it packs, so we have to pick individual elements to apply reverb to. We could, for example, create another clap that has reverb on it, so let's do that right now. Okay, here's a Kong that I prepared beforehand. It contains two claps that you can find in the factory sound bank, and I did not treat them with any methods that we haven't gone over yet. One thing worth mentioning is that I've moved the stacked clap ahead of the snare a little bit, so that the peak of a stacked clap sits nicely on top of the snare. Let's create an RV7000 and apply some reverb to those claps. And, not to forget, some basic equalization on the mixer channel. The main elements of our drum kit are sounding alright so far, so let's fill out the top end a little bit. I've gone through the Kong library and selected some samples beforehand. 4 crash cymbals and 2 hi-hats. On their own they sound like this. Apart from panning and a transient shaper on the crash cymbals, these are straight from the Kong library. Let's treat them to some reverb and equalization before we'll start bringing the drums together using Reason's powerful buzzing system. The first thing that needs some glue here is the clap and the snare. We'll send them over to a new bus and slightly compress them. This would also be a good opportunity to use another transient shaper, like for example the one from the Decam series made by Fxpansion. You can pick that up in the Propellerhead rack extension store. Alternatively, you could also use Kong's built-in transient shaper by sending audio through that, or look for the transient shaper combinator patch in the factory sound bank, which recreates the effect using M-class devices. Now that the snare sounds like it's supposed to, we can send it to a drum bus along with the other signals, so let's do that. Here's another opportunity to slightly compress our signal and maybe even apply some saturation to bring out the overall grittiness of the drums. Okay, so there's our full dubstep drum kit, consisting only of factory soundbank samples. Please keep in mind that when constructing your own drum kits, the treatment that your drums need may vary. You may find that some samples already come with a lot of processing and barely need any work at all, but you may also find that other samples will need much more work than I did in this short video. But with Kong and Reason's effects, you definitely have the right tools to tackle the task.